Camden and Sarah's parents were friends long before the children came along. When both women became pregnant around the same time, their bond only grew stronger. The kids grew up side by side, with their parents hoping that one day Camden and Sarah would marry and bless them with grandchildren. For the lively Sarah, the serious Camden was merely the son of her mother's friend. She didn't even see him as a friend, much less anything more. Even as a teenager, she found being around him unbearable and tried to stay away whenever Camden and his parents visited. Life eventually took them in different directions. The diligent and intelligent Camden got into a prestigious university right after high school and left their hometown. Sarah, on the other hand, couldn't boast of any such accomplishments. At 16, she fell in with a bad crowd and focused on things other than her studies. Somehow, she managed to graduate high school, but she couldn't get into a university. So, her mother sent her to college. Sarah and Camden crossed paths again much later at Sarah's birthday party when they were both 24. Camden was now a young professional in an IT company, while Sarah modestly worked as a sales clerk in a clothing store. She felt embarrassed to tell this to an old acquaintance who had achieved so much more than she had. In front of Sarah now stood a man, no longer the boring teenager she remembered. He was interesting, handsome, and clearly interested in her. By the end of the evening, Camden asked her out on a date, and a year later, the couple married, to the delight of both families. Camden moved his wife from their small hometown to the capital, helping her enroll in a university to study something she was genuinely passionate about, unlike the field she had reluctantly pursued in college. When she decided to work, Camden didn't object. His salary was more than enough to cover their expenses. Sarah was the oldest student in her class, surrounded by 18-year-olds while she was 26. Initially, she felt so self-conscious about the age gap that she sat apart from them, mentally shielding herself from the younger crowd. However, she soon made friends and no longer felt the need to isolate herself. She grew especially close to a student named Ethan, who, at 19, was a bit older than the others, and a sophomore who had struggled to move on from his first year. He was the first to reach out to Sarah, and soon the others followed. Sarah appreciated his friendliness. Gradually, she and Ethan began sitting together in class, calling each other in the evenings to discuss assignments, and hanging out at a nearby cafe after classes. To Sarah, Ethan resembled her first love from the bad crowd she once hung out with. This resemblance sparked a rush of affection and uncontrollable, obsessive thoughts about him. Camden began to notice that his wife seemed distant, growing colder towards him. Sarah was constantly on her phone texting someone. "Who's that?" her husband asked jealously. Usually, after such questions, she would hide her phone under her pillow, smile sweetly, and reply, "Just classmates joking about tomorrow's lecture. We have this oddball teacher, kind of out there." Camden, who had loved his wife for as long as he could remember, believed every word. Not wanting to doubt her, he desperately wanted to trust Sarah. In the mornings, Sarah would see her serious and responsible husband off to work before rushing to university, where the cheerful and carefree Ethan awaited her with a sly grin as she entered the classroom. Sarah had fantasized about their first kiss countless times, tossing and turning in bed before falling asleep, but she never imagined she would be the one to initiate it. Ethan had her so enthralled that she felt like she was 16 again, losing touch with reality. Camden was baffled by the transformation in his beloved wife. She seemed irritated by everything he said, angry at his every move. He couldn't even remember the last time Sarah had shown him any affection in bed. Whenever he hinted at intimacy, she always had 100 excuses. Camden was deeply upset, and the thought that something was amiss began to creep into his mind. Someone else was sharing Sarah's bed. Ethan was bold and left deliberate marks on her body, fully aware that his mistress had a husband. He did this specifically so that Camden would notice that his wife belonged to another man. However, Sarah would carefully cover the marks on her neck and wear closed pajamas at home, so all Ethan's efforts were in vain. Camden remained in the dark, blinded by his feelings. Sarah didn't see the obvious. Ethan was using her and indirectly exploiting Camden. He constantly asked her for money, and it was always Sarah who paid the bills at the cafe since her lover was just a poor student. She couldn't demand anything from him, nor did she want to. Moreover, she was oblivious to how Ethan bragged to his friends about the older woman who supported him. He took immense pleasure in this situation. He didn't love Sarah but merely played with her emotions. While Sarah basked in another's arms, Camden tormented himself with thoughts about the future. He knew and felt that his wife was deceiving him, but he didn't know what to do. His enduring love for her prevented him from throwing her out of their home and his life. Somewhere deep down, he clung to the hope that Sarah would come to her senses and reverted to the loving woman she had once been. Camden nostalgically remembered the first year of their relationship, when his dream had come true. This memory kept him from leaving, as he couldn't accept that his bright dream had turned into a nightmare. But one incident changed everything. Since childhood, we've all heard the phrase, "Everything secret becomes clear," encouraging us to be honest. We believe this until we manage to hide something successfully, then realize there are always loopholes. Sarah thought the same when she started seeing Ethan. Their affair had lasted over 6 months, and her husband still didn't know. Despite the marks Ethan left on her, she had become complacent. One night, Ethan was out drinking with friends at a bar and got so drunk that he thought it would be funny to go to Sarah's house and shout his love for her under her window. At 19, consequences are often an afterthought, especially when drunk. It was summer and many windows, including those in Sarah and Camden's home, were open to combat the heat, as Camden opposed air conditioning and preferred natural drafts. Initially, Sarah ignored the shouting outside, as it was common for groups to gather in their yard. However, when she recognized the familiar voice, she listened more closely and felt a chill run down her spine. Cautiously peering out the window, she saw a barely standing Ethan. Just then, Camden walked into the bedroom. Sarah felt like she was neither alive nor dead. The young man was shouting obscene things about their intimate moments, the kind of things that should always stay private. When Camden came into view, Ethan completely lost control of his words. Sarah stood by the window, tears streaming down her face. All she felt was shame and humiliation. This incident, coupled with the intense feeling of burning shame, forced the deceived husband to see the situation in a new light. It was pure chance that made him realize he wasn't dealing with an unattainable, alluring dream, but an ordinary woman who had succumbed to life's temptations. The divorce was swift. Once the young lover learned that Sarah was left without a husband, money, or a place to stay, he vanished. He sent her a text saying their relationship had been a mistake. Morally shattered, Sarah had to return to her hometown and her parents, who welcomed her back without much joy. She had brought disgrace upon the family and had to drop out of university, as Camden was no longer paying her tuition and she had no money of her own. In a whirlwind of emotions, she had destroyed her own life and what could have been a bright and happy future. Cheating Secrets podcast like me.